And we're going to kick off with our second political keynote. I thought the first was excellent, very revealing, very interesting. The distance of Brighton and Hove to Manchester is, I think, potentially going to be a difficulty, but he appears determined at the moment to live with that and indeed to triumph over it. So for our second political keynote, we go to Andrew Griffith, who is the Shadow Business Secretary. Importantly as well, I think it's worth saying, in a sense quite unusually among modern politicians, has actually had a career outside politics, a not unsuccessful career in the world of business as well. So that's something that he brings as well to the table. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Andrew Griffith, the Secretary of State for Business.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Justin. I'll take that as somebody who is a reluctant politician at best, but someone who cares deeply about our country and who understands that the only way to grow is through the productive problem-solving power of business and private capital, the thing that all of you are engaged in solving customers' problems every day. And it's always a delight to be here. I think I was kind enough to be invited a year ago. I hope I have reasonable tenure of employment. We shall see, but I don't expect that to change in the next few weeks. So I understand very firmly that this industry is a huge, huge national asset. In these difficult times, very much of your supply chains, the wonderful engineering manufacturing that this country does and produces, is dual use. And that's something for any politician, when you think about the first job of government to defend ourselves, well, that supply chain has a really vital role to play in that. And you'll have heard, I'm sure, from Mike, the significant economic contribution that the industry makes, one of our largest single industries. And as somebody who was only briefly exports minister, I learned a huge amount about the sheer volume and market share of exports from automotive. Last year, I sat with Aston Martin, both at the very most senior engineers in the company and apprenticeships right at the start of that journey. And it was proof and reminded to me that advanced manufacturing isn't some memory, some legacy. It's something that we, that you do, that Britain does every single day. I'm delighted that over the last year, we, our country, you, the industry, have benefited from trade deals that, yes, we started, and yes, this government has continued to deliver, showing a rare cross-party consensus, if you like, both in terms of the US, the Gulf, India, and many others, the CPTPP, all opportunities for this wonderful industry to increase its horizons and increase its global market share. As Shadow Business Secretary, someone who hopes one day to hold that very, very important role in government, you can always count on my support. And when JLR was hit by a cyber attack last September, the single most damaging, potentially state actor threat of its time, I went up to JLR to see the situation for myself, and we Conservatives strongly supported the government putting in place that bridge to protect the supply chain, a helping hand for a profitable business, not a handout or a nationalisation or a subsidy. We've also in Parliament, and entirely alone as a party, opposed Labour's botched 50% steel tariffs, something whose only effect is to drive up the cost of raw material steel for manufacturing businesses based here in the UK. All sorts of added costs and complications while doing nothing to protect our national security or help long-term steelmaking. And I do think that any government that really understood business, and there is a dearth of business experience, sadly, in government, would never have gone about those changes in the way that they did. Entirely, I always say, the law that is passed most often in Parliament is the law of unintended consequences. They do it every day, and that is another, I'm sad to say, example of not having fully thought through. It will do damage to the automotive and to many manufacturing industries across the UK. Now, I represent one of the most rural constituencies, districts in the whole of the south of England. It's called Arundel and the South Downs. The clue is in the name. This is a very agricultural rural constituency. And yet, such is the depth and strength of the supply chain, that automotive is well represented in jobs in that rural constituency. Firms like GTR Composites in Fontwell, precision composite manufacturing rooted right in the heart of West Sussex, or Aptilian in Curdford, engineering solutions across automotive, defence, aerospace and marine. And I neighbour Rolls-Royce at Goodwood, which is on a rather more significant scale. When we think about the footprint of the industry, we also think about this weekend, Formula One. Once again, at its home in Silverstone, 7 of the top 10 teams on the grid have their headquarters in the United Kingdom within a 50-mile radius. 40,000 skilled workers, £9 billion a year to the economy. Now, we Conservatives know that opportunity has to be earned, and never more so than in the competitive, often brutally competitive world we live in today. I did spend 25 years in business, and I know that the best thing that the government can do, and this is our belief and philosophy, the best thing the government can often do is to get out of the way and allow you to do what you do brilliantly well. Too often politicians do the opposite: more regulations, more levies, more taxes, more controls, more attacks on people's autonomy to choose their own vehicle. And if we're honest, under different leadership in the past, my own party was guilty of that too. But in a concept I think some of you in your firms are familiar with, we are under new management. So let me be clear for you today what the changed Conservative Party's policy will be when we form the next government. No arbitrary bans on internal combustion vehicles. Instead, a drivetrain neutral approach, putting that most conservative of principles, choice, at its heart. The UK will once again, as a market, align itself with US federal policy, the single largest automotive market on the planet, as well as the de facto EU position of no ban, so that British firms can once again compete on the strength of their engineering heritage, and manufacturers can buy and sell in the UK on the strength of the competitiveness of their platform. It was, if I'm honest, and I did say this a year ago, Mike, madness to throw away that precious combustion engine experience, the detail of high pressure combustion, of fluid dynamics and technology, in an unnaturally fast pursuit of all electric, something in which British and European manufacturers had a far lower competitive advantage. And it is an example of dogma. It wasn't just by politicians, it was by the industry themselves, if we're honest, to destroy that price signal and dictate to citizens, even when that advantaged overseas jobs and overseas manufacturers. Now, when it comes to the ZEV mandate, we will scrap it entirely. We'll fund that by also ending distortive subsidies in the market. And I would say UK manufacturers cannot wait for the conclusion of some endless ambiguity about the next Labour government leadership. We need action now. Action this day, action before Parliament goes into its summer recess in just days' time. Every day for this vital industry counts. No more fines on firms, because in the real world, consumer demand didn't match the uninformed forecasts of a Mandarin sitting behind a desk in Whitehall. For those of you representing global firms, I say this: we're proud of our engineering heritage. You are welcome in Britain. No one else has such capabilities. The Millbrook Proving Ground, the National Automotive Innovation Centre at Warwick, Cranfield, Coventry, Loughborough, universities turning out engineers that the world's best snap up directly. But Conservatives don't advocate for protective tariffs or the erection of artificial non-tariff barriers to entry. We'll compete on our own merits, and not for us the 45% protectionist import tariffs that the EU has imposed. More widely, under Kemi's leadership, we've got a plan for the economic revolution the UK needs. Cheaper energy. Britain's industrial electricity prices 4 times as expensive as the US, 50% more expensive than across the Channel in France and Germany. We're not going to stand by and let Britain deindustrialise and supply chains shift to countries building new power stations based on coal. We will repeal the Climate Change Act, axe the emissions trading scheme on electricity generations, and scrap the subsidies that pay wind and solar up to 3 times the market rate, all paid for by you. And as Mike said earlier, a 25% reduction in energy costs through the BIC scheme will still mean that prices will be 60% higher than our next nearest competitor. That is no basis to compete structurally for the long term. Second, we'll restore a flexible and balanced labour market. There are 9 million people in this country of working age who are not in work. Youth unemployment is higher in the United Kingdom than is higher than the EU average for the first time ever since that data was collected. So we will scrap the whole of Labour's Unemployment Rights Act, bringing back the flexibility to your workplace that we lived with for the last 20 or 30 years. No return to the 1970s, which risks giving the UK the least competitive labour market in the OECD. Third, a chainsaw to red tape and the out-of-control regulators who police it. It is just too slow and too expensive to get anything done in this country. And it's not you, it's the regulators that come up with reasons to constantly say no. We are preparing plans to do exactly that, and rather than talk about how we're going to do it, over time we will show you precisely how. Fourthly, lower and simpler taxes. We have, as Conservatives, pledged to scrap the family business death tax, to reform things like the self-employed rules, and to cut business rates. And fifth and finally, but perhaps the most important of all, something I feel very passionate about, understanding business and your contribution to society. The next Conservative government will celebrate the wealth creators, the builders, the risk takers in rooms like this, not treat them as a problem or something to simply have tax extracted from them. So I want your industry to thrive, to succeed, to be vibrant. We should back ourselves as a country. Britain has got everything it needs to compete. Our language, our history, our heritage, our culture, our capabilities, the supply chains, ingenuity and abundance. What it's lacked for too long are politicians who understand that, who see it as their job to back you, not to bury you. We understand exactly that. We've got your backs. Britain is ready, and so are we. Thank you. Thank you.